Jambo, habari zenu. Mimi naitwa Ajay Ramasubramaniam. Unaweza kuniita AJ. Mimi ni mkurugenzi mtendaji wa startup Reseau. Sisi ni msingi katika Mumbai. Reseau katika startup Reseau ni neno la Kifaransa linalomaanisha mtandao. Ninajua Kiswahili kidogo kidogo, kwani niliishi Dar es Salaam kutoka mwaka 2004 hadi 2008 katika kampuni inayoitwa Quality Group. Nimezunguka nchi nzima nikiuza trekta ndogo ndogo, power tiller. Kwa hivyo kidogo ya Tanzania ndani yangu. Samahani kwa Kiswahili kichovunjika. So that's a little bit of Swahili that I got to kind of practice and get out after several years, after about 14 years. I lived about 4.5 years in Dar es Salaam back in the day. But thank you so much for taking time to register for the event and being here. I'd like to walk you all through a small deck before we go on to talking about who we are. I think it is very important to emphasize as to why we are here. Why Tanzania, why East Africa, and why Africa as a continent. So let me quickly share a deck that we had up for today. Here we go. Let me just pull this up. There you go. All right, cool. So this is a fairly old paragraph. Most of you, if you have been in the startup ecosystem, you would have been seeing this from back in 2013, 2014, when Kaufman Foundation had come up with a very solid global report as to why startups and entrepreneurship is the future of job creation, the future which runs the engine of economies, and so on and so forth. If you go back 50 years, probably the number of years Fortune 500 companies stayed in the list was about 50 years or more. If you go back 30 years, probably the number of years Fortune 500 companies stayed in that list was roughly around 20 years. But today, if you go on to the Fortune 500 list, there are a lot of companies which are churning so much. And many of them, probably you wouldn't have heard of them 20 years back. And many of them who made the list 50 years back, they no more are in that list. The simple reason being that many of them, they did not continue to innovate. They were not continuing to stay relevant to who their consumers are. Because now we are in the age of the consumer or the customer age, where the customer is in a lot more control of his or her dialogue, engagement with different brands, day-to-day use of different products and services, and so on and so forth. So continued ongoing innovation and being on top of your game when it comes to consumer behavior is fairly important. And startups, by nature of being agile, have been able to do that, because of which, if you look at it anywhere in the world, probably the jobs that have been created by startups in the last decade and a half are phenomenally higher than those created by companies which have probably been around for a century. So that's why startups are very much relevant. Entrepreneurship needs to be supported, and one has to be innovative. So that brings us to the power of internet economy and technology. A lot of things on this slide. It's a lot of lip service, it's a lot of talk. But when it comes to emerging markets, while on one hand, I have names like Airbnb, Netflix, Uber, Amazon put up here, I don't think they make sense or they are relevant when it comes to emerging markets. And when I say emerging markets, whether we talk of India, and in the same way, if you're talking of Tanzania, if you're talking of East Africa and Africa, I don't think many of these guys are relevant. And we have the advantage or benefit of having a little bit of hindsight, because I feel India is still probably 5 to 7 years ahead of the curve where Africa is when it comes to the startup ecosystem. And we have seen that back in 2015, people who were building Uber of X, Uber of Y, they were trying to ape what was working in the West. Many of them, they got funded, but it was very difficult to scale and kind of grow over time, because the problems which the Indian consumer faces are very Indian in nature. So it requires an Indian entrepreneur to understand Indian business and build for that. The same applies for Africa, the same applies for Tanzania. The reason I have names like Ramani, Copagas, M-Pesa, Jami, and East Africa Fruits put here is because these are the guys who are going to build the unicorns, and these are the guys who are going to build solutions which will solve Tanzanian first or African first problems. I think it is phenomenal that Copagas has had an exit to Circle Gas in 2020, and that is something which probably will spur a lot more youth, a lot more people who have the best of two worlds in terms of having grown up in Tanzania or having faced or seen local economic problems, but at the same time have quality education, have probably some work experience. They will be the ones who will be able to apply technology and internet economy to solve problems of Tanzanian people of the East African community, and not only enable economic growth but also create a lot of jobs, attract a lot of foreign direct investment, and build solutions which are at scale. So that brings us to the Africa context. And this is a big part of why we are here, or why we were very keen on launching in Africa and choosing Tanzania and East Africa as a beachhead. 1.3 billion people on the continent, more than 500 million smartphone users, more than 30% of people in the age group of 10 to 24, a $300 billion economy, internet economy in a decade span. And more importantly, you have net new 300 million people who will start using internet or will come onto the internet in the next 5 years, thanks to a lot of infrastructure work that the World Bank and African Development Bank is doing. So that makes Africa very relevant, and it's very timely to be an entrepreneur, to be a startup in the African context. Why Tanzania? I think Paul was trying to touch upon this, but there was a little bit of noise and you're able to not hear a lot of it. Close to 60 million population, 166% population growth decade on decade, the top five populated country in Africa, 66% population under the age group of 25, more than 6 million people in Dar es Salaam, on its way to become a mega city by 2030, 43 million mobile phone subscribers, which is almost 70% of the population, 17 million users connected to the internet, close to 7 million monthly active users. All of this makes the internet economy all the more relevant to Tanzania, and why internet entrepreneurship is probably the way forward. Yes, there are challenges. Every year, about 600,000 to 800,000 graduates come out of the universities and higher learning institutions, and they fight for 50,000 jobs. So a lot of unemployment. But hey, that is what entrepreneurship is all about, or can act as a catalyst. Instead of being dependent or a job seeker, I think by becoming an entrepreneur, you can probably alleviate unemployment. You can create jobs for a few 100,000 rather than being a job seeker. And that is why startups and entrepreneurship is critical to the economic development of a country like Tanzania, for the East African community, and Africa at large. So Silicon Door is here to stay, and it's more relevant now, more so than ever, for a simple reason that you have huge untapped potential with a vibrant, booming market. A mega city, any city with a population of more than 2 million, keep aside 10 billion, has got huge potential in terms of solving challenges of rapid consumerization, which comes with rapid urbanization. If you're looking at a project at 10 million people a decade from now, that's a huge opportunity to solve for. I lived there 2004 to 2008, and when Paul told that, I mean, even though I keep reading stuff, back in 2008, I think the population of Tanzania was roughly 37 million. Today, it's close to 60 million. I mean, it is phenomenal in terms of growth, and not just by sheer number, but this happens when you have a lower infant mortality rate and higher life expectancy. And both of these happen only when the government is doing something to improve the basic infrastructure requirement when it comes to healthcare. So when you have a growing population and there's a high percentage of youth, there's a huge opportunity to solve for, and entrepreneurship and startups can play the role of that catalyst. The second one is consumerization. When you have 66% people in the age group of under 25, their behavior is very different than people who probably are twice their age. Also, their behavior when it comes to using handphone, when it comes to using internet, when it comes to using smartphones, is very different. And this rapid consumerization, where year on year there's a 50% growth in the requirement of mobile phone subscriptions and internet subscriptions, I think rapid consumerization is a big play for internet entrepreneurs to kind of latch on to the opportunity, right? Because when consumer behavior keeps changing, that is the opportunity you want to go after. Connected city. So while Dar es Salaam itself might have a population of close to 7 million, Tanzania might have a population of 60 million. I think the bigger opportunity to look at is the 6 landlocked countries that border Tanzania, and that has another captive 196 million population. Many of these countries are Swahili speaking. So anyone who is looking at becoming an entrepreneur in Tanzania, it's not just the 60 million opportunity you're looking at, but rather a 260 million opportunity that you can cater to. Because with these landlocked countries, I guess there is a huge opportunity for you to tap into a lot of opportunities into these countries. So while the starting point can be Dar es Salaam and Tanzania, I think you can easily connect into some of these countries, whether it is Malawi, Zambia, Rwanda, Burundi, and DRC. So that's a huge opportunity. And the last one, a thriving, fast growing ecosystem with the kind of work that the folks at, say, Sahara Ventures or Smart Lab 255 and the likes are doing as enablers, becoming incubators and accelerators, but also with the kind of entrepreneurs that you're seeing who are successfully raising money, getting into Y Combinator, getting into Techstars, Andron getting an exit through Copa Gas. I think a lot of these people are going to be the catalyst for enabling the ecosystem to churn out more entrepreneurs and start looking at entrepreneurship as a way of life. So rather than being a job seeker, you become a job creator. As they say, it takes a village to raise a child. So this is a very favorite honeycomb structure that I like, I talk about, and we as a company believe in. So startups are at the core of everything that we do, but it is not just about the startup. So it takes a whole ecosystem around it to enable startups, to enable the future of economy. Founders are at the core of it. So people like Jumanne, who you will hear from, Edwin, the Mariams of the world, the Lillians of the world, Androns of the world, all of these guys, they are super critical for enabling a thriving, robust startup ecosystem in Tanzania. Industry, if you look at Vodacom, Tigo, NMB, the Karimjis, who are more than 150 euro as an organization, total, all of these guys are doing their part in a corporate supporting the startup ecosystem by setting up corporate accelerators, by creating a fund like Tech Fund, which the Karimji family has, to support and incubate startups, challenges that are run by a company like Total and NMB and Tigo. So all of this plays its part in nurturing a culture of entrepreneurship within the country. Likewise, if you look at the investor ecosystem, which is still kind of growing, but there's a lot of increasing interest in first generation African entrepreneurs that comes from not just donor agencies, but also VCs who are actively looking at Africa as the next big thing. Talent, you can start a company with 2 people, but soon you're going to require 20. And if everything goes well, probably you're going to require 200 or 2000. So tapping into the university ecosystem and also communities, whether it is tech communities or business communities, I think access to talent becomes super critical when you're looking at building a company over a generation. And last but not the least, the government, which plays a very important role in creating conducive policies for attracting investments into the market, for attracting foreign capital to come in, for attracting investors to look positively, for growing companies to look at creating hubs to tap into the talent, to do away with the heavy unemployment situation that country like Tanzania right now has. And finally, enablers. I mean, everyone listed out here, whether you're running an incubator, co-working space, accelerator, uh, I mean, all of this is what kind of is the physical infrastructure which is supporting the entrepreneurs. But rest of it kind of works around it, and that's why it's very important to kind of look at the African proverb. It takes a village to raise a child in very positive light when it comes to startups and entrepreneurship. So why are we here? To create local jobs, not only for the present, but also for the future, and also to kind of bring about economic prosperity. So accelerators and incubators are not means to the end. They just play one role. But if you're looking at startups and entrepreneurship, it requires different kinds of touch points to kind of take entrepreneur to the next level. So while it's equally important to discover entrepreneurship, it is important to experience entrepreneurship firsthand. So whether it is hackathons, those ideation challenges, I think they are super important. But at the same time, it's very necessary to kind of have structured incubator and accelerator programs, which eventually kind of will lead to venture investments and exits. So the way we look at ourselves, we see ourselves playing a solid role in each of these areas. So while we want to kind of nurture people who aspire to become entrepreneurs, we also want to have those idea challenges, which eventually graduates companies into an incubation process. And from there, take them on to a rapid acceleration, which would kind of help us expose or bring these startups to a global network that we as a company have been operating. So a little bit about us. So built on the founding pillars of startups first, and the hashtag that we are going to use for Swahili speaking world is startups Kwanza. That's what is going to be our motto. Always keep startups at the center of everything that we do. There are four pillars around which our business is built. The first and foremost one is enterprises. So how can we bring more corporates to kind of look at startups so that they can start engaging, start working, start investing? The second one is capital. The third one is markets, so opening up market access for startups. And the last one is services by virtue of events and conferences, networking, boot camps, accelerators, and so on and so forth. Since the time we began, we have been very keen and focused on growing beyond India into Southeast Asia and Middle East Africa. And when it came to Africa, personally, it's kind of homecoming of sorts. That's where I earned my first rupee or my first salary in shillings. So Tanzania always has been close to my heart. But having said that, talking to a lot of potential partners from the ecosystem, we felt that we won't want to go to a place where there's already a lot of noise. We rather become an ecosystem builder by kind of joining hands with other players in the ecosystem and build out a thriving, robust ecosystem. That's what kind of brings us to Tanzania. I also have with me Shweta Tiwari, who is my co-founder, who you will soon hear from. She'll be moderating the panel, which is coming up next. What's our track record? I mean, you'd want to know who we are and what we do. So as a team, we have nurtured over 600 startups in the past 7 years. And in total, we have probably reached more than 5,000 startups from different parts of the world, offering different kinds of programs and services. Directly created more than 9,000 jobs in India by virtue of startups that have gone through different programs. Companies that have been accelerated through our programs have raised in excess of $80 million. Cumulatively, we have set up more than 30 corporate accelerators and innovation programs. So thereby tapping into a huge network of corporates that we would work with. And lastly, I mean, we always believe that if we are to teach entrepreneurship or accelerate companies, we ourselves need to know how to be sustainable, how to be scalable. And we have generated more than $10 million in revenue ourselves as a startup accelerator. So very organic growth and very sustainable operations is what we run. Like I said, there are four things that we do. The first and foremost one is enterprises, enabling enterprise of future. So think of us like the tech stars and the plug and play of the world. Just that our focus is not North America or Europe, but it is emerging markets in South and Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa. We work very closely with corporates in helping them solve corporate challenges. But the core of everything that we do is startups. So we help startups get their first set of customers, but at the same time, we help big corporates solve enterprise level challenges by working closely with startups. It results in multiple things. It could be as simple as a technology partnership. It could be potential acquisition, or it could be a corporate venture capital kind of a model where corporates invest in startups. So that is the first part of our business. The second one is capital. This is something that we will deep dive a little bit more when we talk about our 3-year strategy. But startups are always looking for capital and investors are always looking at quality deal flow. And by virtue of programs that we run, we feel that we are in some kind of a vantage point where we are able to identify good quality companies early on and showcase them in front of potential investors. The third one is markets. We work closely with governments, government of Canada, Australia, UK, Denmark. We do a lot of work with government organizations and government ministries in enabling market access programs. We enable companies explore global markets right from day one. So even with Tanzania, this is something that will be a part of our blueprint when it comes to running programs. How do we get exposure of Tanzanian entrepreneurs to a global market right from day one? So a core part of our program is to help Tanzanian entrepreneurs not just to sell in East Africa or Africa, but how can we kind of take them to the Canadas and the Europes and the Indias of the world. And the last one, services. We operate our own branded boot camps, accelerators, events and conferences, all platforms which kind of provide a stage or a leg up to startups to go to the next level. So we enable access, we provide a booster and multiply exposure. That is a nutshell of what we're able to bring to the table for entrepreneurs. And our forte lies in helping build exponential organizations, whether you're talking of startups or whether you talk of corporates. By virtue of working in the technology and innovation space, this is something that we can stick our neck out and say that, hey, this is how we help organizations bring in multiplier or build for multiplier. So we bring a very solid repertoire of corporates for whom we run accelerator programs, cutting across banking, financial services, telecom, media and technology, sports and entertainment, healthcare, manufacturing, energy. So a lot of global names in here for whom we set up and operate corporate accelerators and innovation labs. So any company or any startup that we work with in Tanzania through our programs, This is an existing network of corporates that we will be opening up the doors for. So access to corporates becomes very easy. Own branded programs like I spoke about. So global market access, we already work with 5 different countries, which again is an opportunity for opening doors for local entrepreneurs. But also we run thematic programs focusing on youth, focusing on women entrepreneurs, and sales. So these are programs that over the period of time that we will eventually introduce into Tanzania. So very specific focus programs. In fact, you'll be hearing from Gloria Kaguo, who is the co-founder at Queza Technologies, which is headquartered in between Tanzania and South Africa. And Gloria was a part of GrowthX vSprint, which is our accelerator program for women entrepreneurs. So you'll hear about how some of these programs are playing its role in nurturing entrepreneurs. And the third part is events and conferences, very focused thematic events focusing on AI, technology, and fintech that we run. So all of these, they provide platform to different partners that we engage with and we work with. We also published a bunch of knowledge reports, so kind of providing or producing those industry insights, which kind of brings together different stakeholders, whether they are startups, investors, corporates, and so on and so forth. All of this kind of helps us in staying ahead of the curve in identifying where opportunities are. One of the reasons why we are here today and talking to an audience which is largely from Tanzania is that if we speak to anyone and we talk about Tanzania, we talk about East Africa, they still feel it is 3 or 5 years away from some kind of a boom. But we feel that being there ahead of the boom makes a lot of sense in terms of becoming a part of the ecosystem and nurturing the ecosystem, rather than coming there when there are 10 more people already doing the same work that we do. And the dynamic nature of the startup ecosystem that we are in, it requires us to be very iterative and innovative in the approach that we bring in. So I'll I'll probably kind of I'll just do 1 or 2 more slides before I hand it over back to Paul and Shweta. So we bring a very solid value-added approach to startups and startup programming. We prefer working with companies which are early on, not just at an idea stage, but with a sort of an MVP and a core team in place. But our goal is, how do we help companies scale and go to the next level? So our programs basically cut across monetization, distribution, access to customers, and overall product development. And for this, the programming kind of brings in a lot of in-house mentors, industry mentors. We bring in entrepreneurs in residence who have had the first-hand experience of bringing companies, opening up access to investors and industry, all of which eventually helps in building a great company. So that is what we bring as an approach to taking companies or taking startups from a very early stage to a kind of scale up or a growth stage company. And we bring a very solid global network, so to say, a lot of places where we operate our own programs, but many places that we also bring in value added network. So in total of about 23 odd strategic partners across regions, and we access more than 30,000 startups in different parts of the world. Excuse me, which kind of puts us in very solid stead when it comes to working with governments and working with industry. With that, I'll just take a pause. I'll be more than happy to take questions, and once we are done with that, I'll hand it over to Shweta to moderate the panel with which is focused on the opportunities and challenges that the tech entrepreneurship ecosystem in Tanzania provides. So.
Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. We are just heading towards the evening, or I must say, Jambo, Tanzania. Welcome to our pre-launch event, and a big thank you to all for joining us today. My name is Shweta Tiwari, and I'm the co-founder at Startup Reseau. So before we start the panel discussion, let me just give you a very quick context to the topic. In the recent past, we have seen a number of initiatives taken both by private as well as public sector to foster entrepreneurship in Tanzania. And again, for us, this is something that we have been closely following up over the past few months, rather, I would say couple of years. And these initiatives have indeed been a boost to the ecosystem by providing support system to entrepreneurs, creating job opportunities, giving access to finances, and so on. So today in our panel discussion, we would be focusing on discussing the current state of entrepreneurship in Tanzania. And in our conversation, we would also bring upon insightful information, data points on both opportunities as well as challenges. So make sure you have your notepads and pens ready. And since I have such a broad representation from the ecosystem here, I am sure it's going to be an interesting discussion. So a very warm welcome to my co-panelist. I have here with me Jumane, who's the who's the founder at Sahara Ventures. He will help us share an ecosystem enablers perspective on the topic. My next panelist is Gloria, who's a co-founder at Quasar Technologies, and she, being an entrepreneur herself, would be sharing her perspective on the opportunities and challenges that she has been facing during her journey. Next, I have with me my colleague Paul Mandela. Paul has recently joined us at a startup Reseau, and he is leading our initiatives here in Tanzania. And from his past experience of operating multiple skill development programs, open innovation programs, he would be sharing his perspective from that. So let's move on to our panelists. And my first question goes to Jumane. Jumane, as I understand, Sahara Ventures is a key ecosystem enabler in the country. Could you share with us your journey as well as Sahara's journey?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Rita. Great to be with Gloria and Paul. It's a great afternoon in Tanzania. Yeah, so it's a long story, but I'll cut it short. So I started working in the ecosystem. It's almost my 9th year. Started as the first innovation hub manager of one of the public innovation hubs, Boone Innovation Hub. And then after my contract ended, I decided to do something of my own. Co-founded Sahara Ventures with some few other guys from the ecosystem. The idea was to create a platform to showcase what is happening in Tanzania. When we were starting, we had Demo Africa, we had Pivot East happening in Kenya, there was Slash in Finland, Crunchbase, and all those kind of events happening across the world. But there was nothing much happening in Tanzania, and that's what motivated us to create a platform, some form of a marketplace to showcase innovators and entrepreneurs from our own ecosystem. That evolved really fast because a lot of opportunity emerged from the conference. We came to realize there's so many other things which we can be able to do in terms of building a strong innovation, tech, and entrepreneurship ecosystem. We jumped into innovation consulting, impact consulting, and future consulting. So we registered a consulting firm. We did a lot of work around innovation. We established a lot of programs that kind of adapt innovation and entrepreneurial approach. And eventually, we started our accelerator, Sahara Accelerator, which is basically a post-revenue accelerator program, which is both venture-backed and corporate-sponsored. We work with corporate partners who are looking to adapt innovation and new solution to their corporate setup, but also we work with development partner who are looking to use innovation as a tool to foster socioeconomic development. But also we work with the like of Chanzo Capital, My Growth Fund, and other investment firms in Africa to do investor matchmaking through our venture-backed accelerator program. So basically, Sahara Ventures' mission is to build the innovation ecosystem in Africa. Right now, we operate in 8 other African countries where we do both physical and virtual marketplaces. And yeah, we're excited to be part of this fast-growing Tanzanian innovation ecosystem.
Wow, that's interesting. I'm sure you guys indeed are playing an interesting role in supporting the ecosystem, and we look forward to coming by coming to Tanzania. We look forward to partnering with Sahara and doing some great work there. So let's move on to Gloria. Gloria, can you help us understand your journey as an entrepreneur, and if you could also share some information on Quasar Technologies with us?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Gloria, and I'm the product and marketing lead of Quasar Technologies. So I started my entrepreneurship journey when I was 16, and I was under training under NLab Innovation Academy. And it was while I was training by them, I applied for Meltwater entrepreneurship school, that is MEST, where I wanted to go and proceed with my studies on software entrepreneurship. And it was there where I met my co-founders for Quasar Technologies. What Quasar does, a retail startup where we enable small retailers to source inventory through us. We have a mobile app where they can After they download it, they can order whatever stocks they want from different wholesalers, and then we do the last mile distribution to for these wholesalers, where we deliver the products to them, to the small retailers, I mean. Apart from Kweza, while I was at MEST in Ghana, that's where I also got into a program that's called Young Sustainable Impact, that's Norwegian based, where I also co-founded another startup with some of my co-founders in agri-tech. And what we do is we enable coffee farmers in Colombia. We've now started working in South America, where we enable coffee farmers to earn more from the coffee they produce. Yeah, so that's more intro of what was I doing of myself.
That's interesting. So, Jumane, coming back to you, I'm sure pandemic has affected all the sectors, all the industry, and this is across the globe. And I'm sure even Africa would have seen some positive as well as negative impact of the pandemic over the startup ecosystem. Can you help us understand what has been, or how does the past 10 months or 15 months look like during the pandemic? How did it get affected? And if you could also, my second part of the question is, if you could also share insights on the role that corporates or donor agencies or governments would have played to help the ecosystem come out of this situation.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm glad I'm seeing some people here from TSA, Tanzania Startup Association, where I sit as a founding board member. Luckily, we did a study, so it's more of a scientific insight, and it has been shared with the public. There was a lot of lessons, but I think one of the key lessons was most of businesses that are tech related, that use technology as a core part of their business, instead of having a negative impact on their businesses, it had positive impact, because most of the consumers moved to rely on using platform to access different products and services. So it literally accelerated the platform and the sharing economy. I think companies like Food Sasa or Smart Class and the likes who use digital platform to pull customers, to them it was a blessing in terms of adoption of the technology and increase the number of users. But at Sahara Ventures, we also work with traditional SMEs. We run something called Reseau Accelerator, where we work with post-revenue investor, preparing these businesses to be investor ready. It's what we call an IRP program. So the likes of Mkuza Chick, East African Fruit, AFCO Investment, and Sana Vita, all these businesses that are not primarily tech-related companies, but they're purely traditional SMEs. To them, the results were really bad. They really struggled a lot because their value chains were affected, their markets were affected, their access to capital was low because risk related to giving them loans during that time. So it has both impact, positive impact on the tech-related businesses, and a bit of a negative impact to non-tech related businesses, especially businesses in the nutrition value chain. Businesses in the nutrition value chain and the likes. In terms of what the government or development partner or anyone who is a friend of ecosystem would have done, I think there's a lot that we could have done, and some things were done. First of all, we had a lot of conversation in the ecosystem happening on how businesses can survive during that time. I remember Sahara Venture, we ran our own campaign called Navigating the Crisis, where we shared a lot of tools and resources to our own entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs outside, through platforms such as FB Start, on what they can do actually to navigate the crisis. So that was one area, sharing information and providing a platform for them to survive. Another thing we did with our growth stage businesses was helping them with their business process reengineering, helping them to think about new marketing model, helping them to integrate technology in their processes, but also to find strategic partners to help them with other markets. In terms of the role of the government, starting from other African countries, of course, where at least there was some sort of a capacity for the government to support the ecosystem. we saw government pumping in money to the ecosystem to help their businesses at least being able to be in a position where they can be bailed out. We saw support in terms of policies and tax structure changing so that those businesses can be supported. So that is some of the things we were kind of expecting to happen in Tanzania. Just a bit of stuff here and there, but nothing like really, really concrete. From the side of development partners, we are seeing some initiative. I think HEDIF and some other partners, including Doto Hub, and they did this resilience program, trying to see how they can continue to support some of these businesses. So there have been some activities happening here and there, but I really think most of these activities were designed for very early stage businesses, and there is a need to look on better ways to support growth stage businesses, because for them, if you give them 10K, 15K to bail them out, the likes of Mkuza Chief, so Asas Dairy and the like, it's kind of insignificant. So we need to find a way, whether it's a government, whether it's a development partner, whether it's financial institutions, on how to come up with these like structures and strategies that will allow them to scale. Because it is not like we've gone through the crisis. The crisis is still roaming around us, and we better prepared on what is about to come. And most of this business might be affected again.
Wow. I'm sure the ecosystem has played an important role, and thank you to players like yourself who have played this role and helped the ecosystem come out with crisis situation like this. And I think that's what we need, right? An ecosystem needs players like ourselves, like us, to come forward and support the startups and the multiple stakeholders during this crisis situation. So Gloria, coming to you, my next question to you is, you being an entrepreneur, you have been through multiple programs in multiple geographies. You've been through programs in Tanzania, South Africa, Ghana. In fact, you've also been part of a program which was in India, and this was one of our programs where you were a part of. While being through all these programs, I'm sure you would have gained a lot of experiences. Can you talk to us about the challenges faced by startups with respect to ecosystem support, or access to talent, or even access to funding?
Yeah, that's a broad question, but thank you. So there's a lot of challenges well, with being an entrepreneur. So for instance, well, let's start with talent. As for us, it was easy to create a team because we're all in the program. But then when we started scaling up, I think that's when we found the real issue, because you'd find there's a lot of people would apply for a certain job, and then when you come to narrowing down to the number of people you want, you find only few are able to take the kind of job you want. And the bad thing about being in startup is you cannot afford specialized talent. So you have to go for the little amount you can pay to get talent. So, and which brings me to the point of support. So if we if startups can get access to the kind of talent they want, and then what can we do? I think this is where support comes in. So being under MEST and growth with Sprint, NYC as well, I think one thing I really appreciated from them was the kind of support we got. And what do I mean by this? So you find in startups, there's a lot of things we are unable to do. For instance, right now we are fundraising, and we've been struggling a lot with just getting an editor. So we had to go back to the community, our MEST community, and look for people who are good in accounting and all that. So you find this is kind of hard to get. But then this is why we need communities to be there. So there's a lot of people who are from the diaspora nowadays, and a lot of people in the diaspora are looking back to invest back into Africa. So I think what different incubators could do is the kind of support I think that most startups need. Not most of it is found in incubators. Most of the things you find learning while on the ground, which is quite challenging. There are things you wish you would learn while you are incubated. And these things are such as unit economics. I think one of the issues I've seen even here in Tanzania, I'm speaking to multiple entrepreneurs. And while I mentor some of our entrepreneurs I know, you find to ask people, what are your customer acquisition costs and things like that. And you find people do not have any idea with unit economics. Which I think is really crucial, because this shows you the direction of where your business is going. And then another thing I'd say is also strategy. So we learn business models and all that, but people still need to, there's still more to get from that, such as people learning on blue ocean strategies, which you find most don't know, you find people are working in a certain particular area which is saturated, and then when there's a lot of high competition, you find people get stuck, and because we do not learn on how to strategize from the beginning. So it's easy to be kicked out by your competitor. But when you learn such kind of strategies while being in a certain environment ecosystem is really, really important. And then what I'd say again in terms of support, I think there's need to be, I think it's time we create a pipeline for international organizations to be able to be connected to startups, especially here in Tanzania, because I think when it comes to East Africa, we see Kenya is very, very competitive. Just living there, and I was working there last year, and you'd see there's too much competition. But when you come to Tanzania and you see also investments, it's kind of far than we are. So I think one thing that can be done as well is for these incubators and I think different programs to create a pipeline for international organizations to be able to work close with startups. So I'd say, for instance, you go through a particular course. I think we went through YC, Kweza, and then one of the things we got from it was we got free digital ocean services. Even under MEST, we got free digital ocean services for $10,000, which is really, really helpful for a startup. Yeah, and then another thing I'd say, also, I think what the manager said, how he has close connections to different companies, and I think private companies as well. Imagine if you could leverage on that, and let's say within Sahara, the companies within Sahara, if there's a way to help companies, big companies, I mean, partner up with small startups. So for instance, mobile money is in TZ, and you see there's people working in fintech startups, and there's more to be built upon such systems. So what if, for instance, the problem I have with editors. So what if a company is looking for an editor or an accountant, or maybe they do not know how to prepare their data room if they're fundraising? And then I think it's the time where now, let's say Vodacom could come in and partner with a certain company that is being incubated at Sahara Ventures, which will be really helpful for companies. And also when it comes to funding, funding is really expensive, I'd say, especially for small startups. I'd say first-time startups. I say it's really expensive in two ways. First, it takes a really long time. And I think one thing I also learned again is most of us start fundraising without having the particular knowledge. So this is something which is really funny. I attended what Ajay said before. I think while we were attending the growth sprint, we learned on financial models, and there was the fundraising part. I didn't pay too much attention to that, but then right on this fundraising stage, and God, it is really hard. So it's really hard. So you need an auditor. I meant an auditor. Yeah, so there's a question there. So you see, we need such kind of knowledge for people to learn how to prepare the data room and their financial models and all that. And then lastly, on fundraising, I'd say one thing I'd really add up to is people need to be told about equity and their cap tables early, because it's easy being a first-time founder. The money that is going to affect your cap table, how your equity is going to be affected as well. And apart from that, I think the last thing I'd say in fundraising is communications. I think another issue is we do not know how to communicate. Most of us look for funds through applying for grants and looking for connections, but I think there's a lot of ways for people to reach out to investors, such as leveraging on platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn, and learning how to communicate in approaching such investors is really key. Yeah, so that's it from my side.
That's very helpful. Ecosystem players like us, and many other friends from Tanzania who are, and mental note about it. And this is the sort of we plan to do the same in Tanzania. So access to capital, some training to entrepreneurs in terms of I would say, revisit support in terms of getting access to customers, support in terms of getting access to and knowing what are the different kind of fundings which are available as a startup that I can get access to. I think that's something that we need to play a role in terms of putting all of this together and supporting entrepreneurs getting access to all of this. And I've made a note of it, and I'm sure many people in the audience have made a note of it. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for
So,
talking on behalf of the
Correct.
entrepreneurs. I yeah, thank you, Saloon, for that. So thank you, Gloria, for pointing that out. Jumane, I'll come back to you again, and my next question to you is, why do you think Silicon Valley style investment approach is not best suited for African startups? And we all keep listening and hearing about things that work in the West, the Y Combinator model, and the multiple things, right? But in your experience, why do you think that is something that wouldn't work in a country like Tanzania or a region like Africa? And my next part of the question to you would be, how do you think we can educate investors around this and help them attract more capital into the region?
Yeah, so your question is very specific and it's pushing me into a specific school of thought. So I will say we need all the approaches we can have to attract capital to African businesses, whether it's a Silicon Valley approach, whether it's a Silicon Cape, whether it's Silicon Savannah, Silicon Accra, or Silicon Da approach. We just need any approach which can be able to attract investment to African businesses.
Okay.
One thing for sure, and this is based from our own lessons with the Sahara Accelerator. Primarily, most of us, we adapted some of this approach on how to run and manage incubators and innovation spaces, primarily from the likes of InfoDev, Village Capital. Back in the early days, we were using those resources from the likes of MLab, who were actually giving us guidelines on how to design and run incubator programs. And to be honest, they were very helpful to first-time innovation managers and accelerator managers. And this was around 2013, 2012. But the more you get into our ecosystem and understand the challenges and the dynamics and challenges with the systems and structures, legal and regulatory frameworks, you came to realize some of the models, they don't work. Or if you want them to work, then you have to work really hard. We have tried multiple times with different partners to establish our own investment fund. At some point of time, we are working on something called Sahara Capital. We went completely into like later stages with the investors when we did an intensive study of the market and how investors exit. We stumbled upon some obstacles and we have a lot of lessons with that. So you came to realize documents that will lead to through startup school, documents like SAFE, Simple Agreement for Future Exits, or some other documents that are used by 500 startup and Y Combinator. They're not necessarily work in our ecosystem. They don't fit in with our legal and regulatory frameworks. So what you came to realize is you definitely have to disrupt. You have to be innovative. You have to come up with your own models that will work. We do multiple models with some of the businesses we support through our IRP. We have companies we work with through PSAs, profit sharing agreements. We have companies that we charge consulting fee to do introduction to them on their behalf. We have companies that we charge them service charges to help assess them so that they can get feedback from us, but also link them to external consultants and experts. So as an incubator or a business accelerator operating in Africa, you have to be really smart because most of these models, like I'll take 10% equity from this business. Once they exit, I'll get a 10x or 12x or 15x return. It usually doesn't happen that much. So I know there's a lot of experts in this area more than me. I can see some of ours and others. So it's up to us. Do we want to design models that fit our own ecosystem? Can we look into loopholes that we have in our legal and regulatory framework. I know one of the funds that is kind of established right now, they're playing around with this trust fund law so that they can be able to design the fund from that angle. So there's a lot of things that needs to be considered before just adapting what is happening in Silicon Valley and try to replicate it exactly in our ecosystem. But one thing for sure, we need that excitement. We need that energy that's happening in Silicon Valley. We need those transactions that are happening in Silicon Valley because it's significant. We are seeing them happening in Kings, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa. And being a chips in my eye guy, I want to see more of those deals happening also in Dar es Salaam, where I was raised and born. So it's very, very important to design these systems that allow that Silicon Valley money type come to our ecosystem, but also we need to ignite our own local investors, local high net worth individual to appreciate intangible assets and then advise them because traditionally most of these guys, they believe in physical assets, building, farms, hotels and everything. If we can find a way to create an appetite for them to invest in startup, if we can design models that are safe for them to exit or co-own our businesses. And if we can also try to change our mindset to be a bit less, mindset of our entrepreneurs to be a bit less selfish and allow other people to come into their businesses because that's another challenge we are facing, then we can be able to create these mechanisms that work. So our bottom line is we need all the approach you can have because we literally have a huge deficit of capital in our ecosystems.
So what I understand is there's no playbook approach, or you can't just replicate something that's happening in Silicon Valley, but you definitely take the best practices. You take things that are working there, get I would say inspired with those, come back to your own country or your own region, see what works in your region and what doesn't, and basis that create your own plan, your own playbook, I would say. So yeah, I completely
definitely, and I think you should know more than me. That's the basis of frugal and jugaad innovation, trying to replicate something, design it to work on your way at a better value. And India, you are very good with that. That's why we're excited you guys are coming to Tanzania to disrupt us. So welcome. So we're really looking for that. How can we design models that fits our own environment so that they can respond to our ecosystem? But let's not ignore that we need that energy and the vibe that is happening in other ecosystems because it's healthy for the growth of our own ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Very, very, very well put that, and all the points taken, Jumani, and looking forward to collaborate with you on those. Gloria, I'll come to you, and I know we are running short on time. My last two questions to the panelists. So, Gloria, with your experience, what would you say, B2B or B2C? What are the what is more scalable in Africa? And what about the regional focus startups here?
That's very specific because I think
I've
how
made
Africa's
specific questions for you guys.
yeah, I think that's kind of specific because the way you see how North Africa is structured, things that are kind of different from how the West and East are. So you find in West Africa, there's a lot of fintech companies blooming there. And then when you come to East Africa, we have a lot of agri-tech startups, healthcare startups, and all that. So whether it's B2B or B2C, I think I'd say for my case, what I believe, I think B2B works more. And it's because of two reasons I say this. So one, we still have not very developed infrastructure. I mean, infrastructure is a bit kind of poor. And at the same time, the people want to spend, the spending pattern of people is still kind of low. So with those 2 points, I think B2B has more room to play. You see with how Twiga Foods is doing, how SoCoach is doing. You see how Jumia, Uber, like most of the things bloom mostly on B2B because we want to do less for more. So with that, I'd say B2B. And in terms of the particular sector that I think would actually has more opportunities, in terms of the region, I think right now I'd say in logistics and e-commerce, because a lot of people now are doing their business online with digital marketing and all that. So with Instagram being there, Facebook advertising, now we have WhatsApp business. I don't know how the privacy is going to affect the businesses, but I think businesses have a lot of room to play when it comes to e-commerce and logistics. And when I say logistics, I mean these food apps. And I've seen food SaaS. I don't know how they're doing the deliveries, but I think there's a lot of food that can be supplied. Seeing how even in e-commerce businesses, people still need their goods to be delivered to their customers. And yeah, and we even have these Chinese groups nowadays in WhatsApp and all that. So I think logistics has a really, really much space to bloom in the region.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So that brings me to my last question before we open up for questions. So my last question to both of you, Jumane and Gloria, is we know the Tanzanian startup ecosystem has been, or the East African startup ecosystem has been developing since past few years, but it is still at the nascent stage. How do you see next 5 years? Where do you see there are opportunities? And this time I've made sure my question is broad and it is not too specific.
Great. So I'm an apologetic optimistic. Like I'm very optimistic person. So first of all, we will see more organizations such as RS coming to Tanzania
Yeah.
because it's an exciting ecosystem. It's growing really fast. The same pace of growth we've seen in the past 5 years with the like of Seed Space coming into the ecosystem, ANZA, Kiri Hub, all these local and regional and international organizations booming across the country.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more of them happening, and that is something which I'm really optimistic. Another thing, I think we are going to solve the puzzle of investment that has been a bit of a challenge in our ecosystem, so that we can have more local investment, and this will encourage regional and international investors also to pump in cash into the ecosystem. Another thing, I'm very optimistic. I'm sitting on the board of TSA, Tanzania Startup Association, and we're trying to champion the Startup Act and encouraging and working with other players to work on some issues around policies and regulation. I'm very sure that's another area where we can be able to move us on, if I can say that, to the right direction. Another area which I think we are going to do really well is on skills and talents. I'm seeing a lot of young people. There's a lot of change of mindset in terms of learning and adapting new skills. I'm seeing startups like the likes of Mandela, Ramda, Moringa emerging also in Tanzania to help us create enterprise level developers who can support our startups. I'm seeing more commitment from the government. We've just seen the Ministry of ICT being established. Yesterday, we were in a strategic meeting on how we can advise the minister on the new ICT Act, which is coming. So there's a lot of things that are very positive that are coming from the ecosystem. And I'm seeing us growing exponentially. But the likes of Gloria, the likes of Shilton, the likes of Prego Jaffet, Shadrach, all these new names in the ecosystem, young entrepreneurs who are kind of very energetic, and the rest of the team of those who raised funds a few days ago through the Resilience Fund. There's a lot of new faces coming into the ecosystem, which is healthy. Enough of Saluma Wazi, Kasen Rosie, Jumanne, Brian, all these guys who have been around for so long. Now we're seeing a lot of new faces, which is good news. So there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of excitement, and I'm really happy. And I'm really happy that you guys also coming to the ecosystem.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Jumane. Gloria, as an entrepreneur, where do you see opportunities over the course of next 5 years?
I think I sort of answered that previously. Maybe just to add up on top of what Jumane said, I think one thing I also see is just to top up on in terms of talent, because I think there's so many youth who are not employed yet, and I've been talking to a lot of youth who are in varsities, and you see how everyone wants to get into entrepreneurship, but and most are stuck with the point where on how funding is the biggest challenge, which I think for my case, I think once we have players like how you guys are coming in, having Sahara Ventures and Don't Have and others, I think now I think changing the way of how things are, currently I see things have been more of, most startups are taught on how to taught on how to create business models, pitch, look for grants and competitions and all that. But I think with different players coming in, with more startups coming up, I think even the way of how things are going to be is going to be quite different. So I feel like even just the direction of how things should be like from people being taught on how to grow their companies, and then to how to create partnerships which will help them blossom more, how to do market research and all that, and then up to the pitching, which I believe should be like the last stage. So I think things changing in the how things have been done, and also I see a lot of investment coming in. Just glad the ICT sector has now, I think department, I'm not sure what that is, has been created now. I think it's time for change, and yeah, I don't know, I'm not so competent on that side, but I think a lot of things are going to change with this new department being formed.
Yeah. And just adding to both of you, we as Startup Reseau, we see huge opportunity in Tanzania, rather I would say East Africa as a region.
There was some really good insights that Jumanne and Gloria brought about, and thank you, Shweta, for moderating the panel. Some very hard-hitting questions, some very straightforward answers, some of them which are long-winded and which kind of is not immediate, but I think it is. We all evolve as we go along. So thanks for that. So I'm going to quickly share my screen and take our audience. Yeah. So we have a short term and a long term plan. Let me begin with the long term one. So these are three broad things that we aspire to do in the Tanzanian market. The first and foremost one is to impact the broader entrepreneurship ecosystem. And like Giovanni rightly pointed out, I think local problems need local solutions, which will be built by local entrepreneurs. But at the same time, you require a lot of vibe and energy to come from different directions and different markets which are at different levels of maturity. And this vibe and energy can be that of people, of capital, of networks, and so on and so forth. So the first and foremost thing that we want to set up for Tanzania as a market is running accelerator programs. We are looking at ways in which we can probably open up a physical space sometime in 2021. But even without the physical space to begin with, running some very deep domain kind of programs or programming is something that we want to do. And some of the questions that were asked right after the earlier presentation that I was making, whether it is access to professional services, access to technology credits, like Gloria mentioned, getting the Microsofts, Facebooks, and the Googles of the world to shell out anywhere between $25,000 to $100,000 in credits to early stage companies goes a long way in kind of building out mobile and internet first kind of solutions. But more importantly, bringing in network of mentors, advisors, partners, corporates from as diverse geographies as Canada, UK, EU, India, Southeast Asia. I think that is something that we feel will help in bringing about a lot of perspectives and help people build solid technology, but technology that can be built for scale. So in the next slide, I'll be talking about what are some of the early programming that you can expect in the next couple of quarters. The second one is industry projects. And with the likes of Abdi, who was with us early when we started, I mean, whether you look at banks, whether you look at telecom industry, everyone is looking at innovating. The CPG or FMCG industry is looking at innovating. And startups have a very important, crucial role to play in shaping future of different industries. So we want to also bring about our experience and expertise in setting up and operationalizing industry projects, which not only include setting up industry first kind of accelerators, but also a lot of open innovation programs that allow you to tap into talent and startups that are not limited to Tanzania, to East Africa, but how can we tap into a global network of startups that we bring in, a lot of universities that we closely work with in different parts of the world? How can we tap into those talents? Because at the end of the day, if there's a lot of innovation happening from an industry standpoint, it is going to bring about influx of new talent from other markets coming in. It is going to kind of help in creating global innovation hubs or engineering centers of large corporates or large technology companies in Tanzania as a market that will solve the problem not only of eradicating unemployment, but also it will spur a completely new generation of entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs. But more importantly, industry will move forward in several ways, and that will help in churning out a lot of different kinds of products and services. And the last one, which is the most important one, is investments. So while it's a part of our long-term 3-year plan, I think as early as 2021, we want to kind of partake in the whole startup investment scene. And like Shadrach had asked a question early on, we are figuring out accounting, taxation, and legal norms around how do we go about investing. And like Jumani spoke about, I think you don't typically look at just one way of making venture investments or debt investments, equity or debt investments, but probably what are the different models that might be very specific to Tanzania. And that is where probably we would also look at partnering with folks like whether it is the Saharas of the world or whoever else is making early stage investments. I guess, I mean, like you said, unapologetically optimistic. If you're an entrepreneur and you're not unapologetically optimistic, you have no business being an entrepreneur. So, I mean, taking this leap of faith and jumping head along into Tanzania and to build out East Africa is a vision. It is an ambition. And unless and until we take some early bets and early risks, I don't think success will come that easily. So we'll kind of figure out and find our way over the next few months and quarters. But one thing is for sure that we are here to stay, and Tanzania is a market from where we want to build out for East Africa as a region, and over a period of time use that as a successful model that we can take to other parts of the 53 nations in the continent. Coming to short term, which is very immediate, talking of the next couple of quarters, in 2 weeks time we'll be announcing a very solid startup challenge, a startup challenge for which we are bringing together a whole bunch of partners. There is also some cash grants that we are putting in for some winners that we'll be selecting. But more importantly, it is not just about one, two, three prizes for a few $1,000s, but the plan is to run a 30-day boot camp with 10 companies that we'll be selecting. These companies will not be required to pay any kind of fees or equity or any profit sharing agreements, but it is our give back to the ecosystem of sorts to start with. Now, these 10 companies will be going through a 30-day program in which we'll be exposing them, introducing them to a network of mentors, advisors, partners, corporates from different parts of the world, and culminating with a good demo day where we'll be helping these 10 companies pitch in front of investors who are looking at investing in Africa. And we're talking of VC investors. We are not talking of individuals who are looking at a deal flow, but also between the 10 companies, we'll be selecting top 2 or top 3 companies to whom we'll be giving out some cash grants. Again, they will become a part of our community. It is not just a 30-day engagement with them. These will be our ambassadors as we look to build in Tanzania. So we thought that the best way of starting is hire a local person and help him build out in the local market. Second, before you expect anything from the local ecosystem, give something to the ecosystem to build trust, to build confidence, to show what you're capable of. That is what we want to do through this challenge. The second piece is, again, this is something we'll start right from February. And a lot of it is pretty much ongoing programming. So we want to meet startups. So right in the beginning, someone asked the question, how many startups have you met with locally? So this is something that we want to start as a practice. Every week, we'll be having open houses or startup meetups. Most likely, we'll be doing this on Thursdays and Fridays. And the idea is to kind of help early stage companies make better pitches, pitches which are good from a storytelling point of view, but also which kind of make sense financially and will be attractive for getting in front of investors and partners and customers, hosting a lot of fortnightly workshops and webinars. So like Jumani mentioned, there's a lot of learnings that probably could come from an emerging market like India as well, which we could bring and share with entrepreneurs. So that is something they'll be doing through workshops and webinars. Also, we'll be having monthly investor pitches. So we've already identified investors who are already investing in Africa as a continent. For many of them, there might not be too much of visibility into Tanzania as a country or the startup ecosystem. But through our programs, what we want to be able to do is on a monthly basis, identify, handful of good quality companies which are looking to raise money or are ready to pitch in front of investors, and showcasing them through a platform, not just from an investment perspective, but a lot of times it's also important that as a early stage founder, you get feedback and reviews from investors to understand, are you an investable company, what you need to do right, and things of that sort. So in monthly investor pitches is something that we'll be doing. Again, emerging markets. So because we have been working in markets like India and Southeast Asia, there are a lot of companies which have been able to successfully build for scale. And I think it is a very different ball game to do a startup compared to doing a startup which is for not just a few tens of millions, but like in case of India, for a few billions. So getting successful entrepreneurs from markets in India and Southeast Asia to share their stories, share their narratives of how they have gone about building. So uh, you can look at it either from a perspective of inspiration coming, but also in terms of learning, where you can ask very hard-hitting questions when you're looking at building for scale. Fintech is an area that we have been very good at. For last several years, we've been doing a lot of work in fintech, running fintech accelerators, fintech programs with big corporates. So Fintech Fridays is something that we want to start as a very niche focused kind of a bi-weekly initiative where we try and build a fintech ecosystem in Tanzania. And this includes not just fintech startups, but also people who are investing in fintech, the Abdis of the world who are running big banks, understanding what or where they come from in terms of innovation. So building out a bi-weekly fintech Friday practice. And last one, international immersion program. So a lot of countries that we work with in the Western world, whether in the EU, whether in the UK itself, or Canada, there is a lot of interest in terms of Africa. Not just from the point of view of government or donor agencies which are looking at Africa, but also corporations, people who probably were born in some part of Africa, they've relocated, and they have an affinity to kind of the African ecosystem. So building out strong international immersion programs with some of these partner countries, which allows Tanzanian entrepreneurs to explore what kind of global opportunities exist for them, and how do you dream of building a global company right from day zero, and bringing about the vibe and the energy that Jumane touched upon, by exposing them, by kind of getting them access to incubators, accelerators, startup visa programs, and so on and so forth, which allows them to access different means and resources from other markets, which will allow them to kind of build better, build for the future, and build big. So this is something that we plan to do over the next couple of quarters. A lot of people who have attended today, many more who had registered. We had like about 125 people who registered across the LinkedIn event page and some of the mailers that we had sent out. So all of these guys become part of an early community that we are building. And we definitely will be sending out an email talking about our programs. Maybe we'll be coming up with a newsletter shortly, which talks about some of the work that we're doing, so that we keep kind of touching into the ecosystem. And like Shweta and I mentioned, March is when we have identified to kind of make our first visit, and we'll spend a good few days or a couple of weeks in Dar es Salaam, but also going to Dodoma and a bunch of other places, Arusha probably, and checking out what's cooking, what's out there, and form some initial partnerships, and see how we go from there. So yeah, I mean, top 10 domains. I mean, whether the corona pandemic or not, I guess next few quarters, next few years, these are areas that we have identified where there is potentially expected to be a lot of traction. And we'll definitely look for companies in this space, but also beyond this, because like I said, I mean, Africa has African problems to solve, and within Africa, every country has got its own set of problem, which comes from different social, political, different angles, and you need to kind of find solutions which address those problems. So while this is the kind of blueprint, we'll be open and willing to engage with anyone who is building technology startups in Tanzania. If it is within this grid, great. If not, we still will continue to work with you, and over a period of time, see what kind of success stories we can build in Tanzania, in East Africa, and kind of champion that for becoming big in Africa. So Tanzania is our beachhead. We kind of putting in or plan to put in a lot of effort into the market and make that a success story before we head to other shores in the continent. So Tanzanian operations. So Paul is our guy who's there on the ground now. But the plan is over the next 6 to 12 months, we hire at least 4 to 6 more people because we firmly believe that for any company to kind of scale fast, unless and until there are people on the ground, it's very difficult to kind of move the needle forward. So the plan is over the next 6 to 12 months, we have few more people working with Paul. We have a solid on ground team with Shweta, Jagruti, and myself visiting regularly to not manage or supervise, but to lend our expertise, to lend our support, and kind of probably even bring in people from other parts of the world to come in and look at the ecosystem, people who are our friends, people who trust our work. If you're able to bring them into the local ecosystem, I think it will be good for what's happening or people who are building. uh, yeah, and it's a small team. We are a team of about 12 right now, a couple more people joining in on 1st of Feb, so fairly small team. We have a decent advisory board of people who are either venture investors, people who run global companies, people who are successful founders. So yeah, like I said, startup first or startups Kwanzaa is what our belief is, and that's the hashtag when we come to social media. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. We'll be posting stuff regularly, not just about the work we do elsewhere, but also whatever we are doing in Tanzania. We'll be getting stuff out there so that we get more eyeballs from people who matter, people who are interested in the work that we do, and how we are able to engage with them with the local ecosystem. So like they say, Asante Sana, thank you so much. We look forward to working with everyone who's still here. The fact that there are 28, 29 people who are still here, they definitely wanted to hear what we had to share. So I'll end my presentation with that. We'll be happy to take questions, at least on if you want to ask something around the programs that we are planning for the next couple of quarters. Happy to take questions around that. And then we can move on to the closing remarks.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jagriti Bista, Manager, Industry Insights and Programs at Startup Reseau. Hope you all had a great afternoon hearing amazing speakers talk about the opportunities that Tanzania holds for startups. I didn't mention the challenges for an obvious reason that therein also lies opportunities. So moving on to the closing remarks of the day. Thanks, everyone. I won't take much of your time. Let's stay connected. You will hear from us with updates on different programs that we launch in Tanzania. Please feel free to write to us at the email IDs that I'll be putting up it in the chat section. Once again, thank you everyone for being part of a pre-launch event today. Have a great day.